wake up with a sense that the day has already started without you. There's a list somewhere. You don't open it yet. Messages come in. Tabs stay open. Time feels claimed before it feels chosen. By evening, you're tired in a very specific way. Not drained, not fulfilled, just full. Full from motion, not from completion. You feel it most when you try to rest. Your body slows. Your mind doesn't. It starts counting. What moved? What stalled? What never really began? Nothing feels finished, even though nothing feels untouched. There's a name for this, though it's rarely said out loud. Continuous partial attention. Effort spread thin, across too many edges. It looks like productivity, until it doesn't. There's a strange relief in recognizing it, not because it goes away, but because it stops feeling personal. Most people assume this feeling means something is wrong with them. Disorganized, unfocused, bad at managing time. That belief adds weight. It turns a neutral pattern into quiet self-criticism. What often goes unseen is this. The feeling isn't caused by laziness or a lack of discipline. It's shaped by environments that reward movement over resolution. You're responding, not choosing, closing small loops, leaving the larger ones open. Each task takes a fragment of attention, not a conclusion, and fragments pile up. The mind treats unfinished things differently. Open tasks stay active, not loudly, but constantly. So when the day fills with open loops, the mind doesn't register progress. It registers load. That's why you can be busy for hours and still feel behind. This isn't a motivation problem. It's feedback, a quiet signal that the day is built for interruption, not depth. You aren't broken for feeling this. You're noticing something real, and noticing it is the first soft shift. Nothing disappears, but the pressure moves. The day stops looking like a failure. It starts looking like information, something to listen to, something that explains why fullness arrived without finish. For now, you just notice, and let that noticing matter, quietly, today. Once you notice the pattern, you start seeing where it takes shape. It usually begins early, not with effort, with exposure. Before you choose anything, your attention is already split. Requests arrive faster than they can be handled. Each one feels small. Together, they decide the day. The mind treats these as unfinished obligations. Even when you respond, they don't resolve. They come back. A follow-up, a tweak, a reminder. Nothing closes cleanly. A quiet tension builds. You're always almost done, almost caught up, almost free to focus, but almost never becomes finished. Here's what's rarely noticed. The brain treats unfinished tasks as orientation problems, not danger, uncertainty. And uncertainty doesn't like to linger. So the mind checks, softly, again and again. What's next? What's missing? That scanning costs energy. It doesn't create clarity. Neurologically, it keeps you lightly activated. Not dramatic stress, just enough to block rest. You may complete a lot, but if nothing registers as finished, it disappears. It doesn't land. That's why the evening feels off. You can't name what you did, only what's still open. The environment supports this. Digital systems favor continuation, not closure. There's always another update, another option, another task that branches. So your mind adapts. It skims, juggles, moves fast instead of deep. That adaptation is smart. It helps you keep up, but it has a cost. Depth creates endings. Shallow motion doesn't. Without endings, the system stays on. It's easy to read this as inefficiency, but it's closer to overload without resolution. That full but unfinished feeling is your body noticing the gap. Energy was used. No signal said it was done. This isn't something to fix right away. It's something to understand, because when you see the problem is structural, not moral, the self-judgment loosens. You stop fighting the feeling. You listen, and what it says is simple, not urgent, just exact. Effort without closure doesn't become rest, and rest doesn't arrive where nothing ever feels finished. There's a quieter emotional layer here that often gets missed. Not frustration, more like unease. You're doing what's required, responding, adjusting, moving forward, and still, something in you isn't convinced. That feeling comes from how the mind understands completion. It doesn't count activity. It looks for edges. When something ends cleanly, the brain lets go. Attention disengages. A small release follows, barely noticeable. But many modern tasks don't end. They pause, they wait, they return. So the mind keeps them on a shelf, not active, not finished. What's easy to miss is this. Holding that shelf costs energy. Emotional fatigue shows up before physical tiredness, as impatience, a dull irritation, a pull toward distraction without a reason. That's not avoidance. It's the nervous system asking for resolution. Unfinished tasks leave residue. They bleed into the next thing. Focus becomes harder, not because you can't focus, but because attention is already taken. Over time, effort starts to feel different. Starting feels heavy. Ending feels rare. Work begins to feel endless. That matters, because the brain learns fast. If effort doesn't lead to completion, motivation becomes careful, not resistant, protective. This is why rest can feel undeserved, even when you're worn out. The system never heard done, so it stays slightly alert, enough to block real ease. None of this means you're failing. It means the environment offers motion without closure. When you see that, the feeling shifts. Less personal, more mechanical. You can watch it instead of carrying it. The sense of being unfinished isn't an accusation. It's feedback. It's the mind asking for clearer endings. Not fewer tasks, not more effort, just moments that truly end. This doesn't change the structure, but it changes how you hold the day. Instead of pushing through, you acknowledge it, you name it, you let it be accurate. And in that accuracy, it softens, not gone, just lighter. You're no longer fighting the feeling, you're listening. Once you see the feeling as a signal, its tone changes. It stops asking to be explained. It waits to be read. It isn't asking you to do more. It's asking for shape. Completion isn't about finishing everything. It's about giving the mind proof that something ended. The brain doesn't need big wins. It needs clarity, a clear before, a clear after. What's often missed is this. Small endings can calm a system flooded with open loops. That's why some things feel grounding, not because they relax you, because they end. A walk that brings you back home. A page read to the last line. A surface fully cleaned. Each one creates a boundary. It tells the system that effort landed somewhere. Without boundaries, time blurs. The day keeps moving. It never settles. Seen this way, the urgency drops. You're not behind. You're underclosed. That's a different issue, and it needs a different response. Not optimization, not discipline, not doing more in less time. It starts with noticing what actually ends. You might begin to mark things quietly, not for anyone else, for yourself. A small pause after finishing something. No celebration, just acknowledgement. That pause matters. It lets the brain release its grip. Background alertness drops, just a little. Over time, those small drops add up. You'll still have unfinished things. That's not the point. The point is balance. Enough closure for the system to rest. This doesn't fix modern life. It doesn't remove complexity, but it creates small islands of ending inside the day. And those islands change the feeling of it. You stop measuring yourself against done. You start listening for resolution. The sense of fullness eases, not because there's less to carry, because it's held more cleanly. You begin to trust that effort can end, that attention can let go, that rest doesn't have to be earned by collapse. That trust is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as a little more ease at the edges of the day. And in that ease, something else becomes possible. Not a fix, just a gentler way of being with what remains unfinished. Eventually, something shifts. The days may still be full, but they stop feeling accusatory. Unfinished things no longer mean failure. They start to look like a feature of how time is shaped. The fatigue doesn't disappear, but its meaning changes. Instead of, what's wrong with me? The question softens. What did my attention spend itself on today? There's no edge to that question. It's observational. It wants accuracy, not judgment. And once you ask it, patterns appear. What drains without resolving? What gives brief closure? What kinds of effort leave you steadier? Here's something most people miss. Relief doesn't always come from change. Sometimes it comes from being correctly understood by yourself. The mind relaxes when it's no longer misdiagnosed. You may still end the day with open loops. That's normal. What changes is how they sit with you. They move to the background. Knowledge, not tension. This is how the nervous system relearns safety. Not through control, through clarity. You allow yourself to rest without a final tally. Not because everything is done, but because nothing is wrong. That permission is quiet. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels like neutrality returning. And neutrality matters. It lets you lie down without replaying the day. It lets you pause without scanning for mistakes. It lets unfinished things stay unfinished. This isn't resignation, it's calibration. You're aligning expectations with how attention actually works, with how completion actually registers, with how modern days actually unfold. There's no promise of productivity, no promise of peace, just honesty. And honesty has a calming effect. If your days have felt full but oddly hollow, it doesn't mean you're wasting time. It means your system has been working without enough signals of arrival. Now you know how to notice those signals, not to chase them, just to recognize them. That's enough to soften the day, enough to let rest feel less conditional, enough to feel, at times, quietly complete, even while the list stays open. If this felt familiar, you're not alone. You're just paying attention to something real.